Math people, this quick review lesson is aimed at our Chapter 1 ending lesson on GCF and LCM word problems, greatest common factor, least common multiple word problems. So I'm aiming to quickly outline some clues that can tell you if you've got a greatest common factor word problem or a least common multiple word problem. Let's get started. Our first thing is if a word problem, you're reading through it, and it has you separating things or breaking apart items, dividing them into groups, then this is classic clues that you have a greatest common factor word problem, GCF. So some keywords that you might be looking for in a greatest common factor word problem. Number one, we just said it, if you are dividing things into groups. So you might see something is being divided or break apart. Any sort of words that insinuate division. Secondly, this might sound a bit duh, but if you see in the problem greatest, or some variation of the word greatest, biggest, most, then this is a key indicator that you've got a greatest common factor problem. A lot of times the question will say something along the lines of, what is the greatest number of groups that can be formed? And actually, let's look at an example word problem right now to see what that looks like. So I'll read this. It says, a choir director at your school wants to divide the choir into smaller groups. There are 24 sopranos, 60 altos, and 36 tenors. Each group will have the same number of each type of voice. What is the greatest number of groups that can be formed? So right now, I know that this is a GCF word problem, and the things that tip me off to that are I'm dividing students into groups, so dividing into groups. Another thing is the question itself says, what is the greatest number of groups? Ding, ding, ding. So dividing, greatest, I know this is a greatest common factor word problem based on those clue words. And then to solve this, it's pretty simple. You already know how to find GCF. So the work itself is not challenging. The little bit of a challenge is, what type of problem is this? Just to solve it so we can get an answer, the greatest common factor of 24, 60, and 36, I'm going to use upside down division to figure this out. All of these are numbers that can be divided by 6. 24 divided by 6 is 4, 60 divided by 6 is 10, 36 divided by 6 is 6. And all of those numbers, 4, 10, and 6, can be divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. And 2, 5, and 3 are not numbers that can be, they don't share a common factor, they can't all be divided by something, so I've got my GCF. It's the product of the two factors I pulled out. So the greatest common factor is 12. And I should add to this little lesson that when you have a greatest common factor word problem, the GCF most often represents the number of groups. So, if you've determined that a problem is a GCF problem because it's dividing things into groups, if the question itself asks you for the number of groups like this question does, that's what the greatest common factor is. So that tells me, for this example problem, that the greatest number of groups that the choir director can form with the students that they have is 12 groups. I can form 12 groups based on all of these numbers. And that would be my final answer. All right, so we've looked at what makes something a greatest common factor word problem. Let's look at the other side now. What makes something an LCM problem? Well, if the problem talks about things repeating, if you have repetition in a word problem, 9 times out of 10, you have yourself an LCM word problem, a least common multiple word problem. If you'd like it spelled out better than that, here are some keywords that you should look for in an LCM word problem. Well, number one, we just said it, things repeating over and over again. The wording that you'll see in a problem usually will be something along the lines of every blank minutes, or every couple days, or every 6 hours. If you've got something that sounds like that, that's what I mean by repetition, and we'll look at an example shortly. Another thing that you will see in an LCM word problem is the question itself will oftentimes say, how often or how long will it take until all the things in the problem happen at the same time? So if the word problem says, and let's look at one right now, Mary and Nancy work at a calculator producing factory. It's their job to inspect the calculators to make sure that they're working before they're shipped to stores. Mary inspects every 12th calculator, and Nancy inspects every 9th calculator. If that's the case, which calculator will be the first that they both inspect? So I know this is LCM based on the clues that we just talked about. There is repetition in this problem. Mary is inspecting every 12th calculator. Every 12 she picks up, every 12, every 12. And Nancy inspects every 9th calculator. So there's some more repetition. Every 9th, every 9th, every 12th, every 12th. And the question itself asks, when will they both be doing something at the same time? When will they both have a calculator that they both inspect? All of these things lead me to know that I need to find the least common multiple. Now, we know how to find LCM. You could just make a list. You could say, all right, Nancy inspects the 12th calculator, the 24th calculator, the 36th calculator, the 48th, and so on. And Nancy inspects every 9th calculator. So she inspects the 9th one on the production line, the 18th, the 27th, the 36th, etc. And I can stop there because the very first one that they're both going to end up inspecting is calculator number 36. Nancy will have inspected it because she does every 9. Mary will inspect it because she's supposed to do every 12th calculator. And the 36th calculator will fall into both of their inspection ranges. So the answer to this question would be the 36th calculator is something that they will both inspect. Also, I made a list. You'd be more than welcome to instead do upside down division for this. So 12 and 9. Both of those can be divided by 3. I can divide no further. So if you recall, for LCM, you multiply the numbers on the outside that form the L. So 3 times 4 times 3, which is 36. Gets us to the same answer, the 36th calculator. So I hope this helps. I know we kind of breezed through the word problems, or you might have missed something, or maybe you just wanted to hear it again. These are the things you should be looking for to determine if something is a greatest common factor versus a least common multiple word problem. If you have further questions, always feel free to reach out. Otherwise, happy doing math.